The incense still clings to her habit. Sister Lucia is 26 years old, and she can smell the myrrh and frankincense from the morning prayers, mixing with something else now smoke, and underneath the smoke, the copper salt tang of blood seeping through the cathedral stones. She was, until 3 hours ago, a bride of Christ at the convent of Santa Maria del Carmine, a woman who had taken vows at 16 and spent 10 years in contemplation, prayer, and the quiet work of illuminating manuscripts that the monastery sold to churches throughout the Italian peninsula. Now she crouches behind the altar of Otranto's cathedral, her white habit stained with soot and other things she does not want to examine, her hands pressed over the mouth of a girl barely 15, a novice who had been at the convent for only 6 months, to prevent her screaming from revealing their position to the soldiers she can hear moving through the nave. Through a gap between the altar and the wall, she can see what is happening. Ottoman soldiers are methodically working through the cathedral, pulling people from their hiding places, separating them into groups. The men are being bound and led outside, toward the hill that the people of Otranto call the Minerva. The women are being handled differently. The soldiers are examining them, evaluating, making assessments that Lucia recognizes from her father's livestock markets, the calculation of value that precedes sale. She was born Lucia Ferrante, daughter of a merchant who traded in wool and olive oil. She knows what commerce looks like. She knows what happens when human beings become merchandise. Outside, she can hear Archbishop Stefano Agricoli praying. His voice carries through the shattered doors of the cathedral, calm and clear, despite what must be happening to him. He is reciting the Credo, I believe, in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and she can hear other voices joining his. Hundreds of male voices raised in the profession of faith that will be their last words. Then the voice stops mid-phrase. She hears something that sounds like sawing. She hears the Archbishop scream, but only briefly, and then a sound she will carry with her for the rest of her life, the wet, heavy sound of something being torn apart. The novice beneath her hand convulses, trying to scream. Lucia presses harder, her own tears running silently down her cheeks, her lips moving in prayers she cannot voice. A soldier appears at the altar. He is young, perhaps 20, his face still bearing the softness of adolescence despite the hardness in his eyes. He looks at Lucia and the novice with an expression she cannot read, not cruelty exactly, but not mercy either. Assessment, calculation, the evaluation of property. These two, he calls in accented Italian, still young, undamaged. Other soldiers approach. Hands grab Lucia's arms, drag her from behind the altar, tear her habit as she struggles. The novice is similarly seized, her screams finally released as the hand that silenced her is pulled away. They are dragged through the cathedral, past the bodies of priests who tried to defend their flock, past the elderly and the children who have been deemed without value and left where they fell. They are taken through doors that once welcomed the faithful and now open onto a city that has become an abattoir. Otranto is burning. The smoke rises in columns that Lucia can see for miles, marking the destruction of everything she has known. The walls that protected the city for centuries are breached in 3 places. The streets are filled with soldiers moving in organized groups, some carrying plunder, some herding prisoners, some finishing the work of conquest in ways that make Lucia close her eyes and pray for blindness. But she cannot close her ears. She hears everything. The screams, the prayers, the orders shouted in Turkish, the begging in Italian that accomplishes nothing. She hears the sounds of a city dying, and she memorizes them because somewhere beneath her terror is the understanding that someone must survive to tell this story, that what is happening here must not be forgotten. She is a witness. She does not yet know that witnessing will become her purpose, that the testimony she will eventually give will help convince a pope that holy war was the only possible response to what the Ottomans did at Otranto. But that comes later. For now, she is dragged toward the harbor, toward the ships that will carry her away from everything she has ever known, toward a fate that the soldiers are already discussing in terms she is beginning to understand. Prize, property, pleasure. The words follow her through the streets of the burning city. What you are about to learn has been systematically excluded from the histories that celebrate the martyrs of Otranto. The 800 men who refused to convert to Islam and were beheaded on the Hill of Minerva are famous. They were canonized by Pope Francis in 2013, recognized as saints who chose death over apostasy, held up as examples of faith that refused to break under the most extreme pressure. Their story is told in churches, taught in schools, commemorated in monuments throughout southern Italy. But the story of what happened to the women, the wives, daughters, and sisters of those 800 men, and the nuns of the convents that dotted the city, that story has never been told publicly. The church that canonized the male martyrs has never acknowledged what happened to the female survivors, because the women's fate was considered shameful rather than holy. Tonight you will learn what the church has hidden for over 500 years. You will learn what Ottoman soldiers did to the women of Otranto in the days after the city fell. You will learn about the nuns of Santa Maria del Carmine, who were taken from their convent and subjected to treatment that the sources describe only in Latin, in documents that were sealed in Vatican archives for centuries. You will learn why the Ottoman commander Gedek Ahmed Pasha kept the women alive when he killed the men. You will learn about the slave ships that departed Otranto for markets in Albania and beyond. You will learn what survivors reported when they finally reached safety, and why their testimony convinced Pope Sixtus IV that crusade was the only appropriate response. You will learn about Sister Lucia Ferrante, whose account of the fall of Otranto survives in a single manuscript that the Church has never publicized. You will learn what she witnessed, what she endured, and how her testimony shaped the papal response to the Ottoman attack. Subscribe if you want to understand the full horror of what happened at Otranto in 1480. Comment below, telling me where you are watching from, because the 800 martyrs are only half the story. The other half, the half involving the women, is what truly made the Pope authorize holy war. But before I tell you what happened to Sister Lucia and the other women of Otranto, I need to take you back to July 1480, when Ottoman sails first appeared on the horizon, and the people of this small Italian city realized that the war they had heard about for decades had finally come to their shores. The Ottoman Empire in 1480 was the most powerful military force in the world. Sultan Mehmed II, who had conquered Constantinople 27 years earlier and ended the Byzantine Empire, had spent the intervening decades expanding Ottoman territory in every direction. Greece, Serbia, Albania, the Crimea, all had fallen to Ottoman armies that seemed unstoppable. The Mediterranean itself was becoming an Ottoman lake, with raids on Christian shipping growing more frequent and more devastating each year. Italy watched this expansion with growing terror. The Italian states Naples, the Papal States, Venice, Milan, Florence, were locked in their own petty conflicts, unable to unite against a threat that every informed observer understood was coming. Otranto, a small port city on the heel of the Italian boot, was one of the closest points to Ottoman territory in Albania, only 50 miles across the Adriatic. When the Ottoman fleet appeared on the 28th of July 1480, it carried approximately 18,000 soldiers under the command of Gedek Ahmed Pasha, one of Mehmed's most ruthless commanders. Ahmed Pasha had earned his reputation in campaigns across the Balkans, where his treatment of conquered populations had become legendary for its brutality. Otranto had a garrison of perhaps 400 soldiers and a civilian population of approximately 6,000. The walls were medieval, designed for an earlier era of warfare, inadequate against Ottoman siege techniques that had broken far stronger fortifications. Everyone in the city knew that relief from Naples might take weeks to arrive, if it came at all. The siege lasted 15 days. During those 15 days, the people of Otranto experienced what Ottoman military doctrine called softening, the systematic terrorization of a besieged population through bombardment, starvation, and the display of what would happen to those who resisted. Ottoman cannons shattered sections of the wall. Ottoman soldiers captured prisoners outside the walls and executed them in view of the defenders. Ottoman messengers offered terms: convert to Islam, surrender the city, accept Ottoman rule, or face the consequences. The city refused. The garrison fought. The civilian population, including the clergy, prepared for martyrdom if necessary. On August 11, the walls were breached in 3 places simultaneously. Ottoman soldiers poured into the city, and the killing began. Now let us return to Sister Lucia, who was in the convent of Santa Maria del Carmine when the walls fell. The convent stood near the eastern wall of Otranto, close enough that the sisters had heard every cannon shot during the 15-day siege, close enough that they had smelled the smoke from the fires that Ottoman bombardment had ignited in the civilian quarters. The Mother Superior, a woman of 60 named Sister Benedetta, had led them in constant prayer, rosary after rosary, mass after mass, preparation for whatever God intended for them. "We must accept God's will," Sister Benedetta had told them as the sounds of battle drew closer. "If martyrdom comes, we will embrace it. If life continues, we will serve as He directs. Fear is natural, but faith is stronger than fear." Lucia had believed this, had tried to believe it. But when the sounds of massacre reached the convent gates, when the screaming began and did not stop, when Ottoman soldiers began battering at the door that had never been designed to withstand military assault, she discovered that faith and fear could coexist in the same terrified heart. The door shattered.